I'm pretty sure that most people do not even know that this elder race exists in The Witcher. When you first think of elder races in The Witcher, the dwarves, elves, halflings are probably the first things that come to your mind. But they were not the only ones who inhabited the continent in great numbers before humans showed up. There are some forgotten elder races, like the Vran, and the topic of this video, the Werebbubbs, also known as Bobolaks or Bogeymen. Werebbubbs in the time before the first landing already had it difficult to stay alive. In contrast to elves, dwarves and halflings, they less resembled the typical human-like appearance. Instead, Werebbubbs are kind of a sentient beaver race. They are furry, and well, they kind of have a face like a beaver. But as far as I know, they do not chew trees with their teeth. But they might chew anyone who tries to attack them, or attempt to chew through their armor. Werebbubbs have some poor eyesight, but most of the time they can make up for it with their great hearing senses. They are also quite surprisingly able to survive much more severe wounds that would kill most other races in an instant, due to their strange body and metabolism. Werebbubbs have a surprising view on their culture and traditions. According to one of the modern pen and paper RPGs, which was in collaboration with CDPR, the Werebbubbs were a race of creatures who didn't worship any gods. Instead, they worshipped their ancestors. They would be raised on the stories of heroes of their communities, learn about their valor and heroic deeds, of great warriors and wise sages who helped their fellow beaver men and defeated awful and terrifying creatures that threatened them. And even though they weren't violent against the other races, elves didn't like the Werebbubbs, mainly because they looked nothing like the elves did. There used to be plenty of communities and tribes that would live in the valleys and lowlands of the continent. That was until the elves started spreading. Slowly the pointy-eared elves pushed the borders further and further, which drove away the Werebbubbs. They tried to make the best of the situation as they could, and now instead of living kind of everywhere, they were forced to live high in the mountains, to avoid getting into the same conflict with the elves as the Vran did. Against all odds, the Werebbubbs managed to set up a new life in the mountains. They would now call home. Some even prospered. Which of course eventually had to come to an end, when humans eventually came to the north, in the first landing, known also as the Landing of Exiles. Many of the mountains where these creatures lived were filled with gems and valuable minerals, but they themselves didn't like mining them. Humans learned the riches that could be found near where the Werebbubbs lived, and of course they wanted them for themselves. At first humans tried to make peaceful deals with Werebbubbs to extract the resources, but they didn't like the idea of humans poking around and stripping away all the minerals from their homes, which led to a conflict, resulting in hundreds of Werebubb clans and communities being killed, destroyed and slaughtered. There are still Werebubbs on the continent. They are just very rare. Most of the ones who survived went full time below ground, while some others had their contacts only with dwarves, with whom they traded, as they seemed to be the only race that didn't look down on them as much. Them being about the same size probably also made it easier. The Werebubbs, despite being almost extinct, are still a proud race. They are proud of their furry looks, and they like that they are different, even when others can't appreciate them for it. They still tell the tales of their heroic ancestors, and try to live with honor, to be heroic and wise. They refuse to bend the knee to any other race. Even the very, very few Werebubbs that still live in the lowlands are said to refuse to bow down to other races. They'd rather fight and die a heroic death. Werebubbs make almost no appearance in the main book series, or the games. Only from time to time are they mentioned. So why is that? As for the books, the world of The Witcher at first was kind of filled with some of the more different looking races, like the Vran and the Werebubbs. But as Sapkowski said in an interview in 2001, he at first didn't know that The Witcher would be a success. He could develop further on. And so when he started to continue his work, he wiped the slate clean of the Vran and the Werebubbs, and now populated the world with the more typical fantasy races from Tolkien, the elves, dwarves and halflings. The Vran and Werebubbs would become little more than a reference here and there to say that they are almost extinct, and that is why you don't see them. The games never feature any Werebubbs, as far as I could remember, but they do get name dropped from time to time. For example, in Thronebreaker, where near the end of the game, Mieve sarcastically asks a Scoia'tael elf if it was a Werebubb who shot her man.
Then who killed Corporal Larkin, Werebbubbs?
Also, in The Witcher 1, Julian mentioned Bobolocks who were killed by his ancestor. Bobolocks, of course, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, were a different name for Werebubbs.
Had rheumatism and a collection of Bobolak scalps above his mantle.
Why the challenge? Couldn't have gone after something less formidable? A Werebubb, for instance?
But what do you think of these furry-looking beaver men? Would you like to see them appear in the future, or make a quick appearance in a Netflix show? Till the next video. Bye.